So when you're making decisions, what exactly are you seeking? I would say seek for the truth, seek to understand, but much more important, seek the truth, right? So what you will consider is what's really important here. You win some battles, you lose some. You should be fine with that. You can't always win them all. That's the first thing. I know, like, take care of your pride, feelings, whatever, but just let go of it.
It's easy to examine and critique the world, but it's much harder to examine ourselves, to question the assumptions we've inherited, the stories we've believed, and the ideas we've never thought to challenge. I've spent years having this conversation with today's guest, and today I'm glad we finally get to invite everyone else in. So, Zaba, I'm very excited to have you on the show. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Charles. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Awesome. And so, for the first question, I've known you for well over a decade, but for our listeners, they don't have the inside story of who you are. So please, tell us a bit about, who you are, Zuba.
Okay, so hello everyone, and let me correct that, Charles. You can't say over a decade. We haven't known each other for even up to a decade. Maybe
Oh
close,
my
but not.
God.
Yes, thank you.
We are,
And
we are
then
not
hi
we are not
everyone.
going to start.
Hi everyone.
we,
My name is
we're not
Chizoba.
we're
Everyone calls me Chizoba, and I am a ponderer. And the reason why I say ponder and not thinker is because to ponder you have to subconsciously reflect on things. To think, you have to actively think on it, if that makes any sense. So that's me in a nutshell.
okay. Zuba, just to get right into it. Over the years, during the course of our debate, one thing that I've noticed is that when you have an idea and
Yeah.
you grab onto it, you never let go until you get to a satisfaction level. Why do you think you're wired like that? Walk me through that, how that happens.
I like the fact that you use wired because I think that's the only way to actually describe it. So it's not necessarily because I'm putting in conscious effort. But like I said, so because I ponder about things, my mind wouldn't leave it alone. So it's like it's constantly there. It's like would I say like an incessant tapping, right? You've said this thing, it's in my head. So I just need to get to the bottom of it. And until I do so, that's the only way I have like peace of mind per se. So if I don't go after it, if I don't ask questions, if I don't push and keep pushing, even when you're like kind of trying to like push back and just like send me away all of that, I can't help it. So I just have to keep pushing until I get to it. So I would say it's the wired, like you said. I'm just wired.
Are you concerned essentially with the idea that the satisfaction you want to achieve is not necessarily the right thing? Is that a thought that crossed your mind?
Well, it's not per se about satisfaction, honestly. So, to give you context, right? I feel like we live in a world where a lot of people do things because one, it's the way of doing it. It's what they are used to. It's what they've seen people do. And for me, that's not often enough. In fact, most times it's never enough. And it's not because I'm trying to put in effort to, stand out or be satisfied, like you said. It's just because I genuinely feel that we should question some of the things we do. We should at least have a story of why we do the things we do. It's not enough that you're doing things. Like, why exactly are you doing it? And so it's not about satisfaction, but trying to just make sure that, you know, you have like a strong why, you know what you're doing, you know why you're doing it. And most people don't. They're okay with it, I'm not. That's just different.
Um, uh, and so this is like a pursuit of understanding.
Mm. Kind of. Kind of. That's an apt way to put it. Pursuit of understanding, yes. So I would say that I seek to understand things, I seek to understand people, I seek to understand their reasoning, their thought process. And it's funny because most times, okay, let me not say most times, but a lot of times I don't agree, but then at least I understand. So that's a sort of effort, I would say.
But how do you think your innate desire to sort of pursue understanding helps you in search of the truth? And there is no specific context to this. You can decide how to answer the question, but I'm trying to really know how, because the definition of the truth is that the truth is simply this truth. But when you seek a deeper understanding about the process of arriving to the truth, how does that work for you?
So when you say truth in this context, do you mean like absolute truth, or you know how they say my truth, your truth, and the truth? So what exactly do you mean
Uh,
by truth?
I mean, it could be absolute, it could be relative truth, but we do know that context is important, in the pursuit of whatever information you're looking for. But I'm trying to really understand your perspective in terms of how you arrive at the pursuit of truth. Does understanding matter here, or do you want to stick to facts all the time? How does that process work for you?
Okay, so the first thing is that there are actually like absolute truths. Like this one, there are no context to it. It's just the way it is. But then outside of absolute truths, then we now start having like, scenarios and situations and even decisions where context is all you have to rely on. And so this is where we start questioning the decisions we make. Because if you were absolute truth, then it's just like white is white, black is black. You can't wake up and decide that, oh, because I feel like if black shouldn't be black, black should be orange, the orange is the new black, whatever. I don't know. So it doesn't work that way. So for absolute truths, like it's just there. But when we now start looking at everyday living where context, where perspective, upbringing and the stories that we are used to, the our own personal perspectives and feelings, when all of this starts to play out, so that is when we now start questioning exactly what are you doing, is this real? So I would more like say, is this real per se? That's how I will put it. So now it's not like you're pursuing truth per se, because truth is absolute, like I just said. It's now trying to understand the nuances behind the decisions and the rationale that people try to pass off or just pass on most of the times. And I'll give you like a very I don't want to give something that is a bit contradicting or something that would raise, eyebrows. But take for instance, now we live in a world that there are certain topics like politics, religion, feminism, all of that. Within topics like this, within their context, you rarely have absolutes, because a lot of these movements are shaped by feelings, experiences, past lived experiences. And so you often have people trying to justify what they believe is right. And when you try to question those beliefs, most of the times you find people just trying to say things like, oh, but this is the way it's done. So this is the way we should keep doing it. And so that is not enough. It's often not enough. It's never enough.
Oh, so does the understanding of the path through which a conclusion was made, in the case of relative truths, negate the conclusion?
Of course, of course it does. Again, because I strongly believe that if you don't know where someone is coming from, you will never be able to understand where they're going to, right? And I'll give you a very popular story. It's a story about a man, he got married and his wife likes to cut off the head of their fish and grill it, blah, 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 yada, yada. And so because that wasn't what he was used to growing up, he found it weird. Eventually, he asked the wife, why do you do this? And then she said, oh, that's how my mom does it, right? Now, for context, they are well off and all of that. And so the man just didn't let it go. The mother-in-law came visiting once, and then he asked her, so your daughter grills fish this way, she cuts off the head and then grills the rest. So why does she do this? She said that she learned it from you. And then the woman took him back in time that, oh, when we got married, things weren't so good for my husband and myself. And so we had a really small skillet pan then, and the whole fish wouldn't fit in. And so I had to cut out the head so we can just grill the rest of it. And while this may sound like a very abstract story, I feel like that's how a lot of people are in this world. They see people, they grow up watching the people around them, their parents, teachers, whomever, is kind of shaping and leading the paths that they now trail. They watch them do certain things and they assume that, oh, this must be it. They never really put in effort to understand, okay, why are we doing this? Have we always done it this way? Is this the right way of even doing it? And I feel like that's a very good question. Is this the right way of doing it? Are there other options we can explore? Are there other things we should consider? All of these are questions that we should be asking, but a lot of times people are just, content. I mean, if it doesn't hurt anyone, if it doesn't have anyone, I mean, so why bother?
All right. So, in your response to this question and a previous question at that, you seem to reference, our environment shaping us, essentially introducing the argument, the widely debated nature-nurture matrix. And I would like to basically ask you, how much of your worldview do you think is shaped by nature, and how much of it do you think is shaped by your environment?
I think this is a very good question because, in fact, you answered this question for me like one time. And
Did
I
I?
I'll share this story with our audience, right? But you're going to help me because I've forgotten the names of the key players here. I remember there was a child you called and you were telling me about this sports guy. He's an identical twin. I don't remember the sport he plays because I'm not really sports inclined. But yes, he's an identical twin. He's out there doing big things. But the twin brother is out back there in their home country. And obviously, the social gap is between them. It's like, when they say, as the heavens are far above the earth, that's the kind of wide gap that exists. So, and I remember while we were, telling the story passionately, the only thing going through my mind was like, oh my god, this is it, this is it, this is it. Like, and the reason why this was just ringing in my head was because even for me personally, for the longest time, I've always wondered, is it nature, is it nurture? Like, is it really like maybe there's just something in someone that just sets them apart and they go on to do great things? But while you were just sharing that story, it was just clear as day because now we have identical twins, right? If we have two people, you'd be like, okay, maybe this one, the same DNA, like 100% identical, and then the same talent. Because I think from the story you did mention that they were at the time when the brother left, they
Okay, okay.
were exactly.
I,
So
I'll remind you of the story. So, because
yeah,
I was trying to,
exactly.
what is she talking about? But this is about Mo Farah, the British long distance runner
Exactly.
who left Somali as a kid and is now a multiple Olympic champion. And in contrast to his brother who was left behind during that time, who essentially has been shaped by some of the happenstance in his home country. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's the story that I shared that time. So you can continue.
Yeah, so I think that story it sort of puts things in perspective for all of us because honestly, before that story, I've always wondered, right? What if? For me, it's always been what if, and with what ifs are not tangible. You can't measure that.
Yeah.
It's more like it's an emotional anchor, something like you used to feel good. What if I had? What if? What if? But with that story, what he essentially did was just present facts for all of us that actually if you have these two people or if you have this talent and you put it here, you put it in A, this is what you get. You put it in B, this is what you get. So in as much as yes, nature and all of that, it plays a role, but at the end of the day, nurture, the environment, the people, you know, Essentially, the environment you are in, it plays like a very huge role. Like it's very obvious for us to see now.
I honestly didn't know that, you've come to this side of the argument where you seem to agree with nurture over nature. Seeing that I've always known you to be a big nature fan. However, and I'd like to include this as part of the many changes I feel like you've gone through over the years. And my question would then be, having gone through some of the changes you have gone through, some of which includes the conclusion about nurture shaping people more than nature. And I know that, you've also undergone a few more changes, whether it is in your Christian life and other personal relationships that you've had. I wanted to understand, at what point did you start conclusively making those changes? At what point did you start thinking, no, this doesn't make sense? This is what it should be.
Okay, so I would say so far my life is one big um it's one big episode of little moments that just make the big changes. And so I will start first for Christianity. I think that started like a decade ago actually, like it's a decade this year. And I remember the question I was asking at that point in time was I asked myself first, I didn't have an answer, so I decided to ask other people. So I asked myself, what if I wasn't born a Christian? What if I was born a Muslim? Would I still be a Christian? And I didn't have an answer, or maybe I just didn't want to answer myself because looking back at that point, I would obviously be a Muslim. Obviously. I come to asking other people, and this took a whole year. Like I was asking everybody I met at the point, my classmates, my classmates rather, the people I did IT with at the time, um, essentially everyone around. So I asked this question for a year, and I got a lot of very funny answers. Sometimes you find people not wanting to say something, but they instead of being clear, they just try to make it sound really smart so they don't have to say no or yes. And of course, the people that we're asking at this point were all Christians. I'm trying to see if I actually asked a Muslim. They were all Christians because at the time I was in Enugu, yes. So they were all Christians and they gave a lot of funny answers, but two answers really stuck out. The first one was the person was very direct and the person said I would have obviously been a Muslim, most likely. The person did say obviously, the person said most likely, I remember, say I would have most likely been a Muslim. And but the second person said something that, just set me further down that journey. And what this person said was that the person asked me a question. So he was like, if you want to find a fake note, like a fake dollar note, how do you identify it? And it goes on to say that you need to have the original first. So whatever you find, you can now compare against that, and so you're sure that you're not getting fakes. And okay, I took that, and then I started running with that. I went to Cotonou. It was it was another experience. But at the end of the day, essentially, I think asking that question really was just setting me on that path. Because for me, it was trying to discover the truth for myself. It wasn't enough that I was born this way anymore. I had to really come to a point where I make a decision that is what I want. Is this even true? And so that led to all those questions.
All right, without getting into what these questions are and what these changes are, but I'm very well aware that the change process is a very difficult process. It's filled with doubts, lack of understanding, curiosity, and sometimes lack of self-belief. Walk me through what it was like, and did it feel like you were losing any part of yourself by trying to make these hard choices of, you know, believing in the ideas, new information, and letting go of some of the foundational information you've had.
Yeah, of course. It was the thing is it's never really easy to, just let go of the things that you're used to. Even for someone like me that likes to question exactly what it is that we are doing and why we should be doing it. Because I think it was Jordan Peterson that said, to risk an opinion, you have to risk offending people and being offended. Something along those lines. So really, it's it's an invitation to offend. That's just the way to describe it. So it's an invitation to offend people and have them, offend you back and all of that. So, but those questions need to be asked. And when I started asking those questions, there were other things, and these are people that are also close to you that they have their own ideas, they have their own worldviews. And no matter how interesting or exciting you think yours are, everybody's entitled to their own opinion, especially when they are your elders. And so it's not funny, actually. It's actually not funny, having to have conversations with elders and telling them that. I don't think things should be this way. I don't think this is right. And then you're telling them this is why I think it shouldn't be right. For instance, I'll give you an instance you can relate to, right? There's something that is still, common in Southeast. I wouldn't say common, but it still exists in some parts. So this whole slave, outcast, whatever. And I remember there was one time I was having a conversation with someone, and I was saying that essentially, if you say that we are Christians, it means that this ideology has no reality now as a Christian because this is obviously in the past. All things have passed away. And so for you to say that you're a Christian, it means that as a Christian in Christ, whether slave or bound, all of us are free in Christ. And so the implication is that somebody that is an outcast can marry somebody that is, a freeborn or whomever you think this is. And so they actually refute these ideas, not necessarily because they are, essentially bad people or all of that, but because I think I'm starting to, understand the weight of what it is that, we preach in faith in Christ and all of that. It's not something that you expect people to come to terms with? Is this something you wish that they just quickly understood? Yes. But then they've lived realities and experiences. And so it's more like telling them that what we've lived so far, it's not real and this is what is real. So there's that divide there. So it's never an easy path. It's never an easy experience. But at the end of the day, you just have to really decide on what matters and what should matter, not just what matters, what should actually matter. And the truth, like you said, was
Okay, I'll come back to some of the observations you made in your recent response. But I would like to ask you another question before I do that. It's my opinion that people who go through the sort of change that you've gone through and then get to form new beliefs also resort to dogma because they
mm,
are now convinced, they are very convinced that their way is absolute because it started with the change that occurred with them. It wasn't something that someone else told them. And so, because that is the case, it's absolute. And so, my question to you is that the case for you? You know, and if that's the case for you, what has to happen for you to change your current convictions? Yeah.
so. So for me, it's not dogma, but I will be honest enough to admit that I have I try so hard to even understand my person because this is important because if I want to relate to people well, if I want them to understand what I'm saying, I understand that I need to sometimes pull back and not go with the kind of energy that I would, prefer that everybody was just literally bringing to the table, right? So when you say dogma, I would honestly say that for me, no, it's not dogma. But then I would also not be telling the truth if I say that it sometimes doesn't come off that way. Because there are times where I try to like, sit back and ponder and wonder what is it like when somebody else is listening to me. And that's really important. It's important because that person is not me. They don't have my experiences. They are not the ones, that went around asking people all these questions. They are probably fine with where they are. they are not see, they are probably fine with the way things are. They don't see the need and reason for change. So in fact, it was just recently I started putting all of this, into consideration when I try to, talk to people. So it's not dogma, but I would say that my approach before now sometimes can come off a bit overwhelming because sometimes I get a bit too passionate.
I know something or two about that. I know something or two about that. Yeah.
This is not about you, thank you. This is not about you. This is not about you. So yes, I understand that sometimes I can come off a bit passionate, even overwhelming per se, right? And I know that now. Honestly, before I didn't know that, but now I know that because I reflect more now, especially, because for me, it's more important for me now that people really understand exactly what I'm saying. Like, it's really important to me. So if I'm saying something and I'm losing you, like, I don't see the need to even keep saying whatever it is I'm saying. I want you to at least understand what I'm saying. So because that became really important to me, I had to go through the process of trying to understand, what people see when they hear me talk, or maybe I'm trying to pass an idea and all of that. So before now, maybe some people might say it was dogma, but at this point, I would say no. I'm more at the point where I consider myself a farmer, right? I'm more content these days, just sowing seeds and just praying, hoping it sort of germinates.
All right. So just take you back to your earlier responses, and you made reference to how you made arguments as regards how just being a Christian means all things have passed away, and as such, we can't have, especially in the southeastern Nigeria, conversations around freeborn and slaves, right? And my question is, why should that be a Christian talking point? That should be a standard. So why do we have to be Christians to have that realization? Why isn't that a normal realization? Because typically, if we're in 2026, and I know that
Yeah.
I myself am tired of conversations around that in the Southeast, and these are things that have happened even before colonization. Why is it still referenced today? Because these guys, it's not like they can go anywhere. They have no idea of, another home. They own lands, they own properties. So why is it still a big issue? And why should it be a Christian conversation as opposed to a normal, moral, or everyday conversation?
So when you say normal conversation or even moral conversation, I often find myself asking people exactly where does morality come from? What is the standard? Who made morality? Like, what is the standard? What are we measuring against?
Ultimately, and because I've had similar conversation or readings that I think Professor Ravi Zachariah was saying that, making a reference in answering whether there is God or not, and ask somebody what is the what is the standard that requires a scientist to be objective with their findings.
Mhm.
And I don't agree with that argument as a Christian one. I do think that if you're born in any climate, once you become cognizant of who you are, your surroundings, your environment, you do have a maker checker inherently, letting you know that this decision is either right or wrong, especially as it relates to morality.
Hmm. To put things in perspective for you, you know what they say about the Big Bang theory, there was a Big Bang, blah blah blah, and the world came to
Yep.
that.
Yep.
That's trash for so many reasons. Because the world is essentially made up of, very large groups of people, but essentially these people they live like in their own really small communities. If you go around the world, what we have is just small communities everywhere that come together to make one big world. And so, because we have all these small communities, each and every single one of them, they have their own way of life, they have their own culture. And for them, that culture holds true. Is the standard against which they measure, what is good or what is wrong, what should be done or not. And it's quite interesting that across these cultures, there are things that are wrong in A that are good, normal in B. Do you
Yeah.
understand? And so, because we have lots and lots and lots of this culture, take countries like China, for instance. China is a very big country that has like, there's so many cultures within you know, their smaller groups and communities. And so we can't really measure, we can't have a standard, a global standard that way. Because for you to have a global standard per se, it now means that all of us are now going to agree that this one thing holds absolute. Even for
Okay.
even for arguments per se as human life, right? There are even cultures where okay, we now start, qualifying the kind of human life, royal, freeborn, slave, all of that. And so you find out that it's just impossible if we are by ourselves to have this standards per se. And so why this is a Christian conversation, basically because first things first is that even for me, Jesus was a fictional character for me for the longest time. I'm not even making this up. It was until 2021 that he actually dawned on me like you could have head knowledge and it's not heart knowledge. So it wasn't even head knowledge per se. He didn't even get to head knowledge. It was just something up there that, yeah, there's Jesus, he died on the cross. But I honestly did not know anything about the reality of that until I got into historical Jesus. Now, wow, like wow. And so, why is a Christian argument? Is because this is the standard. And it's the standard because the only place that states that there is no freeborn, there is no slave, there is no male or female. Everybody, we are just like everybody, it's just one people, right? So it's not about like, who you are or where you're coming from. Like all of us, we are at the same level. And so because it kind of levels everything, we can now begin to have that as a standard and then we can compare with that. But if we are to go with, why shouldn't because people they have different cultures and perspectives. And to them all of that holds true in their culture and perspective.
Okay. Uh, Typically and throughout history, people have made the argument for a stateless society. And so the Bible is not the first place where this argument has been made, primarily. And secondly, you can make this argument and be a Buddhist. You can make this argument and be a Muslim. And so why should why should we accept the Christianity as the standard with which to have this conversation? Because in my view, this conversation is normal when for anybody who can think logically. As long as you can make logical arguments, you can argue for or against this opinion. And I strongly believe that it shouldn't be a Christian argument. And so I'm not yet very clear on your argument that you know Christianity is the standard for conversations like this, because we have to remember this is one out of many very controversial conversation that's
Yeah.
happening at global scale. Yeah.
Yeah, so I I get where you're coming from, right? Because again,
Hmm.
like I said, we have smaller groups of people. Why not Buddhism? Why not Islam? Because the thing is, and the truth is, when Jesus walked on this earth, he was crucified. It's documented. He died, he was buried, and he resurrected. But now, before the crucifixion, because I think it's very important that we actually understand why he was crucified. Yes, the truth is, he did come on this earth and to die for the sins of mankind. Yes, but exactly how and why did that happen? So the people that crucified him because, he said he was God. For a lot of people, they might not think that it's significant. But it's significant because for the Jews, They believe that they are the chosen generation, like they are the chosen people of God. And so imagine people that grow up with that mindset and then they meet quote unquote a man like them saying things they consider blasphemous like go and sin no more. And so you throughout, the Bible, the New Testament, sorry. So throughout the New Testament, you find them questioning him like, are you God to forgive sins? And why do you claim to be God? And so for Buddha, Buddha never claimed to be God. I think Muhammad even said God is going to send somebody else. But Jesus was the only person that said that he's the way, the truth, and the life. He was the only person out of all these other people. And so if somebody, how do we know that somebody is true? If the reason why we know you're Charles Okafor is because you've gone around telling us you're Charles Okafor. So if we want to find Charles Okafor, it's because you've said it so many times, your documents, they show it, you have that in your passport, whatever documents. But even outside of that, outside of the documentation, it's because you've said it. The reason why I'm Chizoba, why if you're looking for Chizoba and are you Chizoba, and I will say yes, I believe that is because for me to admit that it holds true. I think it's a global, perspective that we can all share that if you say you are this person, then yes, you must be this person, right? And so Jesus really was the only person that said it not once, not twice. And it became the reason they started seeking to kill him, right? And eventually that was why they killed him. He died, was crucified, resurrected, and there are like people also tried to, pretend that that didn't happen. And so, because we have this that is documented as evidence, we can now boldly say that, yes, this is true. It's true not because we want it to be, it's true not because we think is a wonderful story, even if it is. It's true not because it speaks to our feelings and emotions. It's true because it's happened. And that is how you define absolute truth, right? And like I was saying before, you have to question these things because at the end of the day, you don't believe them because they said, it happened. Exactly what happened. Did you ask questions about it? If you say it's true, okay, why is it true? What happened? And so because we know this is true, because we've gone over it back and forth, and we've discovered that it's actually, then we can hold it as a standard. Outside of that, we are just left with communities and cultures.
So I understand you, but I disagree with you. And so here's my question.
Mhm.
Are you able to understand and disagree with someone?
Of course. In fact, I
Okay.
like when I argue with people.
Okay, great. And if I asked you to argue in the affirmative for this being a rational conversation without
Mm,
introducing Christendom to it, are you able to do that?
mm, mm, mm. I see what you're saying, and I know why it's important. I see what you're saying. I know why it's important. Let's see. It's important because not everyone is a Christian, and so they might have some things to say about this. So I get why it's important. But what I'm struggling with right now is how to argue for that.
And that's okay because we're discussing primarily the pursuit of understanding. And so, are you curious to understand how they came about their knowledge or the rationale behind those arguments, where they've never been Christians and they don't even have the understanding of background you have about, the Bible mentioning, or championing a stateless society. So, how do you then appreciate their understanding? And how do you insist that that understanding, is from the Christian standard? Because I think it's not.
Yeah, so I think this question it just reminded me of something, right? Because I like to engage people sometimes because it can be a bit of a risk. So I was going somewhere 29th May, yes. And so I started having a conversation with this man, and I remember asking him that, where do you think you're going after you leave this earth? And he boldly said that he took the liberty of answering for everyone, not just himself. I found that interesting. So he said that everybody was just going to hell. Like for him, it was a done deal. There was no need to stress to stress out. So it was a done deal. He said that everyone was going to hell. So for me, really, sometimes I try to engage people because I want to get their thought process, and not necessarily because I'm trying to, have some sort of conclusion, but because I'm curious. And I would say the only rationale in this case, from a personal perspective again, because it cannot be the absolute at this point, because I understand that for me it's now personal. It's because I want to engage people. I want to know what they are thinking. And so, because it's personal, I wouldn't say it's the standard. I wouldn't even rationalize it because it's just something that is personal. So that's the much I can just say to this.
Okay. I mean, you've answered the question, and perhaps I'm not sure of what I take out of it.
Yeah,
Is your conclusion here? Are you making a case that you understand, you try to engage people, but also to what end do you engage people? And remember, earlier I spoke about people being dogmatic when, or embracing dogmatism when they have arrived at a supposed truth from a point of personal research. And then the question is, what can be added to that research? What if it's a faulty research? And I know that if I pressed you on this, you're going to tell me that no way, it's faulty. But the question before us is simply, how do we contend with a notion where you're, you know, simply stating that the conversations around things like, being stateless is a Christian standard conversation, whereas people have throughout history made these arguments and they were not Christian. They've probably never, read the text on the Bible. How do you contend with, how did they come about that belief? Because for me, it's a rational argument. You don't have to be a Christian to make that argument. You can be a Muslim, you can be a Buddhist to make that argument, and you can be an atheist to make that argument. And so, how do you then arrive at a conclusion that it is a Christian standard, where in the face of these other examples, how do you suppose those other examples came about?
yeah, I get what you mean now. I get what you mean now. And yes, you don't have to be a Christian to make the argument. In fact, before Jesus came, people were having that argument, right? Before Jesus came, this argument is as old as man. So before Jesus came, uh, people were having that argument. And it's because if you go back in time, right, people have always, there's something in man that is seeking, seeking, trying to reach for something, right? There's I even had someone the other day, I think someone posted on their status about, like, how even marriage doesn't help fill this sort of, I don't know, they say it's a void or something. I wouldn't know. And so it's as old as man. People have always, tried to seek, to reach, and all of that. And the only thing I would say at this point, it's because there's something in man that keeps striving and reaching, to make sense of what's happening around them. But then it happens in phases. If you look back, like within your own life, you notice that there were periods where it was probably more intense. And then over time, because you started getting into certain routines and all of that, I wouldn't say it went away, but because there's something comforting about the familiar. There's something about, having a routine and all of that. The sort of, you mindlessly start getting into things, And maybe once in a while when you don't have much to do again, you remember. So it doesn't go away, you just have things, fill up that, so you remember and all of that. So I would say that it's always been there. But the reason why it's there is what I cannot conclusively say at this point. Not because I don't know, but because I do not know how to explain that to you. Mm, yeah.
All right. Most conversation around faith, belief system, and this is not primarily about the Christian belief itself or Christianity in itself, but
Mhm.
other faith organizations. Most of the arguments end in what I would term deadlock, or where people end up with phrases like "let's agree to disagree." And my question to you, about the pursuit of understanding is: at what point do we give way to trust, or do we keep questioning these theories until we are 100% convinced? Because at some point, if we keep going round around this conversation, we probably, wouldn't live here. And so at some point, we have to draw the curtain. And what is the point of drawing the curtain? Are we trusting in the current information we have, or are we saying that there is room to continue questioning these beliefs until we reach a defined conclusion? You know,
So the thing is, there is no 100%. And what I mean in this aspect is that it's not like there is no 100% in belief per se, right? So I'm saying now for the person that is not a Christian, because what we look for most times is we want 1 plus 1 to always remain 2, right? Now, if you engage some mathematicians, they will even like they will take you down this, black hole that 1 plus 1 is not actually 2, and then they start giving you theories just to stress you out, right? But in this
yeah.
context, outside of Christianity, because man is always reaching and seeking, they are trying to make things that are not even logical always appear logical. And if you start questioning people, for instance, sometimes when I listen to certain podcasts, you even hear millionaires, billionaires, they mention things like luck. If you ask someone what is luck now, there is no way to quantify luck because it's not tangible. They mention things like chance. I was just lucky, I got a chance. What exactly is chance? You can't quantify that. But then you can also not deny that it's there. And so, because there are these elements that we cannot quantify as humans, and I think that is one of the reasons why people like they keep trying to push and strive and all of that. And so, back to the story about the twins that we talked about earlier. And so, would you say that maybe the person that left, goodness, I forgot his name again. I know it starts with M, so I'll just call
Mo,
it M.
Mo Farah. He's Mo Farah.
So
Yeah.
it's easier to argue that Mo Farah got lucky. So what exactly is luck in this context? He got the chance, he took it, he got lucky. His brother did not. And so because the problem is that we try to quantify these things. These are really abstract, things, abstract terminologies that we even created just to describe the way we feel about things. Because at the end of the day, it still goes back to like how we feel about these things. So because we cannot really express how we feel about them, we have terms like this to help us. He got lucky. What do we mean by that? So we are trying to say that by circumstances outside of his own control, because at the end of the day, that's what we are just trying to express. So he got lucky. So by certain circumstances outside of his own control that we cannot really define, but we know it happened. And so that was what happened. So when we have conversations like this, the reason why outside of Christianity, outside of Christ, the reason why you can never have 100% is because there are things outside of our own control that we know that we have, that we even express in terms of luck and chance. But then again, we still do not want it to seem like we are illogical. So we sometimes refute them, even though we tend to express them. I don't even know if that makes sense to you.
So we're never going to have a conclusive answer with regards to matters like this or topics like this. Is that your opinion here?
Apparently,
Oh my god. Okay, so and the next will be so there's lots and lots that we could talk about, but just trying to summarize your entire change process and some of the improved way of thinking that you've subscribed to. And my question would be, what is something you're far more certain of today than you were 10 years back?
something I'm far more certain of today is that I'm actually much more weaker than I I used to think I am. And when I say weakness, I don't mean in terms of physical strength. Like, I mean in terms of being like susceptible and vulnerable and all of that. And I say this because there was a moment that just shifts my thinking recently. And this is important because I think I mentioned that my life is just like it's one big episode so of really tiny moments in between. I remember in 2023, I've shared this a couple of times, like it's been 3 years now, but I still find it revolutionary. So I was watching a podcast by Lucy Tembakwari. He was like, I think it was a webinar, he was speaking to someone. I've even forgotten what they were talking about. But in response to one of the questions that he asked him, he said that your reality is your reality. You're not imagining that you're poor. And then he went on to, but that it was like someone just what I say, pour me water. Like it was like someone just splashed water on my face. I remember pausing that video and just looking around because it felt like he was accusing me. But I took that, I really took that word and I plugged it in almost every single aspect of my life, right? For instance, Chizoba, this thing you're doing, you're procrastinating. You're not thinking that maybe you're tired of all of that. You're procrastinating. Or maybe if something happens at work, Chizoba, they really messed you up. They threw you under the bus. It happened. Do you understand? It happened. But then if you want results, you can't stay there. So it's almost like you can't get the feeling. If you want sympathy, that's fine, right? If you want that sympathy, people to, it's fine. But you can't have that and have the results that you claim you want. And so after I heard that, it sort of was like another wake up moment for me. As I just started taking it to every single area of my life. And somehow I feel like maybe because of that I'm not able to look back and I cannot even think of a single moment where I've dwelled so much on the bad things, or maybe the things that didn't really go my way. And funny enough, even like when things go my way, I think that's what made it really revolutionary for me because even when things go my way, okay, this happened, yes, it has happened, but then are you going to stay here or are you just going to move on? Because sometimes it's also tempting to just stay in the feeling that you've arrived, you've got up here. But then what? Life keeps happening. So you can't still stay there again. You just have to like keep moving.
Okay. And for the last question, Zaba, and I really wish we could, stress this conversation as much as we can, but maybe there will be another time for that. But for the last question, what is one habit you wish more people cultivated instead of belief systems?
This is a very good question. And it's good because if it's something I've thought about myself, it's something that I remember last year I was thinking about what I would like to, leave for people, my kids. And it's how to make good decisions. right? Even when it's fast, when you have time, when you don't have time. And I say these decisions are what shapes our lives over time. Like the decisions you make today, you might probably regret them or not in time to come. And so in making decisions, you have to understand that it's not enough that you're making decisions. There are consequences. So first of all, you should be willing to bear those consequences. And so it still comes down to like trying to understand things, seeking the truth. So when you're making decisions, what exactly are you seeking? I would say seek for the truth, seek to understand, but much more important, seek the truth, right? So what you will consider is what's really important here. You win some battles, you lose some. You should be fine with that. You can't always win them all. That's the first thing. What's going to matter in time to come, right? So if you feel like it's not going to make any impact in time, you can let go of it. Let go of your pride. A lot of us have pride and egos, yeah, and that's the reason why we make really bad decisions sometimes. So
Oh
it's not
my god.
of it. Just I know, like take care of your pride, feelings, whatever, but just let go of it. Another thing that is really important is if it's not important, if it's not urgent, if you can get away with not making a decision, take it. I know it's not something that people do, but if you don't have to make a decision, then don't. Just let it go. If you can pass it off to someone, do that. If you don't have to make a decision, take the opportunity not to make it. So that's all I'll have to say, I guess.
And I think that's a really brilliant answer. And Zaba, I want to thank you for being on the show today. I really do appreciate your time. Most of us will spend our lives asking whether our beliefs are right. But maybe the better question is how we came to hold them in the first place. Because sometimes the biggest change doesn't happen when we find a better answer, it happens when we learn to ask a better question. Thank you for listening. I'll see you on the next episode.